Our Lord, on the night that he was betrayed, he spoke to his disciples, and he encouraged them with the words, "Abide in me." He spoke of himself as the vine, that they are the branches, and that their life is to be sourced by their relationship with him, and we abide in him. And then he went on to say, "I have loved you even as the Father has loved me. Remain in my love. When you obey my commandments, you remain in my love, just as I obey my Father's commandments and remain in his love. I have told you these things so that you may be filled with joy. Yes, your joy may overflow. This is my commandment. Love each other in the same way I have loved you. There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friend. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you slaves because a master doesn't confide in his slaves. Now you are my friends, since I have told you everything the Father told me. You didn't choose me, I chose you. I appointed you to go and produce lasting fruit, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask for using my name. This is my command. Love one another. Love one another." And the apostle, as he was at the end of his life, would be brought into the gathering of the church on a pallet. Looking to his left and to his right, he would declare, "Love one another, love one another." Greater love has no one than this, that one lays down one's life for one's friends. And that is a fundamental truth on Memorial Day. And this morning, as we remember those who've gone before us, this is the first Memorial Day when we will remember our own dear friend and brother who shared so deeply of himself and with us, Peter Thomas. On the day of that commemoration, which was June 7th, 2014, when Peter presented that, as he walked down this aisle, one gentleman stepped out who had been at Normandy Beach. And he gave Peter a hug and he said, "Peter, we needed you there that day." Peter went in the morning after, and his first sight of war was the carnage of the beach. But that gentleman that stepped out lied about his age. He was there on Normandy Beach when he was 16 years old. Hardly old enough to shave. But he wanted to serve. The reality of love is one that seems to be draining out of our culture. Because the reality of love, when it is disconnected from a sense of sacrifice, ultimately is not love at all. Because it's all connected. Love is not getting something that we want. Love is giving something of ourselves. That's the clear message that Jesus gives to his disciples when he says, "Greater love has no one than this, but then a man give up his life for his friends." And then he says, "And you are my friends." And the next day he gave up his life. The greatest human demonstration of love is the love that Jesus gave to us, the love that those men of all of our wars, of all of our conflicts, the love that is demonstrated whenever one gives of him or herself to another. Therein is love. The Greek language is wonderful in this regard. C.S. Lewis writes about the four loves. And they have various words for love where we just have one word. Storge, which is a affection, the kind of love that we have for our children or grandchildren or good friends, just an affectionate love. And phileo, which is friendship and collegiality. And eros, well, you know what that is. And then agape, which is the form of love that Jesus is using and that he speaks of when one gives out of oneself for another. Love that is rooted and founded in commitment, not in feeling, not in sentiment, but in commitment. A decision to love, no matter what, a decision to love. And it is that love that is the fundamental fountainhead of all other forms of love. And yet, that seems to have been drawn out. And we seem to be in a time that avoids that fundamental reality of love. And if that isn't there, if the taproot isn't there, everything else is frail and can quickly be disintegrated by the realities of life. Catholic priest Brennan Manning puts it this way: those lives are the lives of those fully engaged in the human struggle will be riddled with bullet holes. Whatever happened in the life of Jesus is in some way going to happen to us. Wounds are necessary. The soul has to be wounded as well as the body. To think that the natural and proper state is to be without wounds is an illusion. Those who wear bulletproof vests protecting themselves from failure, shipwreck, and heartbreak will never know what love is. The unwounded life bears no resemblance to the rabbi, to the Lord. Now, I don't know where I was this morning, but I was someplace having a cup of coffee. And when I went to put a little cream in, take it to sit down and put the final touches on my sermon, there in the rack next to where all the cream is was a copy of the New York Times. And on the front page, above the fold, taking up nearly half the page, was a picture of a man named John Shields. And the article was about a man who, because he had a debilitating disease, made arrangements to die the way he wanted to die, peacefully and painlessly. And we all know about various life circumstances, and we all enter into those kinds of thoughts and debates. But do we realize that the reality of pain creates the opportunity for heroism? The presence of pain in this life creates the opportunity for men and women to show forth a level of dignity that others stand back and look at as heroism. But instead we have a culture where we want to have it our way. We want to have our way so that we can avoid all kinds of pain and anguish and hardships and difficulties. We want to not just choose our children. There are ways to do that, by the way. We just lost Jack Donahue, who was a member of our community. And at Jack's funeral, there were 250 family members, including great-grandchildren. Good Catholic family. Now, there are ways to choose whether or not to have children, and I'm sure after, I think they had 13 kids? 13 kids? Sooner or later, in the midst of that, I'm sure his wife was, no! But we want to choose not just whether or not we have children, but we want to choose what that child looks like and the gender and everything else. We want to have it our way. Not only that, but we want to have a choice about our own gender and our own gender identity. We want to have it our way. We don't want to live with hardships and difficulties in life. We want to insulate ourselves from all kinds of hardships and difficulties, and then we want to move toward death in such a way that we don't have to experience the hard realities of death. Now, I am certain that those boys on Omaha Beach who were men, that those who gave their lives through all these many forms of conflict in our nation's history and the history of other nations as well, I'm sure they would have loved to have made it home so that they could have chosen a life. They could have chosen to live. But they, by their service, chose a higher way, a way of sacrifice, a way that reflected those profound words of Jesus, that greater love has no one than this, but to give up one's life for one's friends. I was doing a memorial service several years ago. Many of you may remember Jack Sims. Jack Sims was one of the Doolittle Raiders. He was off the deck, plane number 2, right after Jimmy Doolittle. And that was the 30 seconds over Tokyo event. And I was honored to perform the ceremony for Jack's passing. And at that ceremony was one of the remaining Doolittle Raiders as well. And there at the graveside showed up some Air Force cadets, some young men, because there was going to be a 21-gun salute on his behalf. I was there early, and they came early, and I called them over, and I said, "Over here, the man we're honoring today was one of the Doolittle Raiders." And they said, "What's that?" If we don't remember acts of heroism, of those who chose to enter into a place where their lives might be given, where their lives might be poured out for the sake of others, for the sake of their friends, then we will be a culture, a nation. We will be a world in which the reality of love drains away. And we will be left with self-serving choices. And anyone who gets in the way of our self-serving choices, we will then define as an enemy. Rather than embracing the realities, the full realities of life. When we lose one of these great men and women who served for us, their passing is rarely marked with much recognition. And yet their lives were characterized by self-giving. And a man named Lawrence Vaincourt wrote about this reality in this poem that I'm going to share with you, not in its entirety, but it's called Just a Common Soldier. He was getting old and paunchy, and his hair was falling fast. And he sat around the American Legion telling stories of the past, of a war he had fought and the deeds he had done in his exploits with his buddies. They were heroes, every one. And though sometimes to his neighbors his tale seemed a joke, all his Legion buddies listened, for they knew whereof he spoke. But we'll hear his tales no longer, for old Bill has passed away, and the world's a little poorer, for a soldier died today. He will not be mourned by many, just his children and his wife, for he lived an ordinary and quiet and uneventful life. Held a job, raised a family, quietly going his own way, and the world won't note his passing, though a soldier died today. When politicians leave this earth, their bodies lie in state while thousands note their passing and proclaim that they were great. Papers tell their whole life stories from the time they were young. But the passing of a soldier goes unnoticed and unsung. Should you find yourself in danger with your enemies at hand, would you want a politician with his ever-shifting sand, or would you prefer a soldier who has sworn to defend his home, his kin, and country, and would fight until the end? He was just a common soldier, and his ranks are growing thin. But his presence should remind us we may need his like again, for when countries are in conflict, then we find the soldier's part is to clean up all the troubles that politicians start. If we cannot do him honor while he's here to hear our praise, then at least give him homage at the ending of his days. Perhaps just a simple headline in a paper that would say, "Our country is in mourning, for a soldier died today." We must never forget those who served, those who gave, those who loved. Will you bow with me in prayer? Lord, for their heroism, for their love, for the power at work within them that gave them the strength to wade onto the beach, to scale the cliffs, to move into places where they knew they were in harm's way. Lord, for the self-sacrifice of your Son, that is the example of love to all, we give you thanks and praise. In his name, amen.